Hello viewers and welcome to a new episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus, Chariot of Steel Edition, a series that's all about discussing the good and very bad of the many tanks and tank-like vehicles you can find in the Chariot of Steel expansion for Flying Circus. In today's episode, Mannschaftswagen-AA, and Fischtraktor A1. Let's start with the Mannschaftswagen. Oh god, how many times am I going to say this? Year introduced, 1598, served with, Fokker Empire, engine, 2 NMB Arbiter 17, strengths, carries all your mans, weaknesses, almost unarmed. The final part of the Fokker Empire's tank ecosystem, the MWAA was designed to transport infantry at the same pace as tanks and through the same dangerous terrain, essentially an extended and expanded ST-style tank. The MWAA could transport a small platoon directly into combat, deployed through large doors on either side of the hull or from escape hatches on top. This would allow infantry to advance alongside tanks, safe from enemy machine guns and shell fragments. Seen as the least important element of the line, the vehicle was delayed by funding issues and only issued after the conclusion of the war in Macchi. The vehicle was soon employed as a cargo carrier in the fringes of the Macchi occupation. Most soldiers only encountered them loaded down with water tanks to resupply anti-guerrilla outposts in isolated villages. However, it has the distinction of being one of the only tanks still being manufactured serially, as a rural supplementary factory was retooled to produce the tank and it has survived to the modern day. Many villages in Dornier and western Voisin are reliant on daring convoys of these transports making dangerous trips through the forests and swamps. There are moments like these where I'm very glad that I use TDS for my video because there's no way I can say Mannschaftswagen straight without dying repeatedly in the process. The Mannschaftswagen is basically summed up right here. It's slow, but can go over practically anything, can't turn well because it's too damn long, has a respectable armor profile of 421, with plenty of integrity to take hits. The crew and passengers will feel very safe, engine reliability is okay, plenty of fuel range, and, well, it's certainly going to be a bit cramped in there, at least it's cheap to run. Looking down here, this thing is a massive armored personnel carrier that can carry 2 whole squad plus the crew in it. You can also notice that the mechanic at the rear to fix the engine inside and the passengers have escape plus 2, so even if the tank got set on fire, practically everyone can get out safely even in the worst case scenario, but with this many people, bad dice roll is bound to happen, so maybe not risk that. Hilariously, the Mark 9 which the Mannschaftswagen is based on can officially carry 50 goddamn infantry in it, though more realistically it's around 30, or around 10 tons of cargo too. There's also no seats for the infantry to sit down on, and some of them will be standing right next to the exposed drive shaft, so, don't get too close, and like its real-life counterpart, the Mannschaftswagen has the loophole trait, which provides the passengers with 16 loopholes, 8 on each side, to fire their small arms out left and right, which is very good because an infantry squad can really pump out a lot of damage. The 2 armor of its side might not be enough against actual anti-tank weapons, but against infantry, it will be enough. The Mannschaftswagen can just park in front of a trench and have the passengers shoot the crap out of anyone within it through the loophole before moving in to finish them off. The loophole also counts as bracing your weapon, and as it turns out, there's a weapon perfect for this exact scenario. It's gonna be expensive to arm your whole squad with it though. Aside from the passengers, the Mannschaftswagen itself only has a LMG frontally, but it does have 2 hatches to add more guns on it if you want, and you only really need 3 crew to drive this tank, so this thing can run real cheap. Other players have to provide the passengers though. So how do you deal with the Mannschaftswagen? Easily, it's the passenger you should be worried about. Just flank the vehicle and shoot it from its weak armor, but with its integrity, it might take a while, and also it might actually be better to capture it because while most village won't have a use for tank, the Mannschaftswagen can be safely used for many other utilities while being able to carry lots of passengers. In other words, people would actually want this thing instead of just scrapping it for its metal. As for its modifications, you can upgrade the Mannschaftswagen with anti-grenade mesh for better protection against thrown grenades, do not work against tank breaker, amphibious conversion to transport infantry over open water, it's good, aside from like 10 different problems you just gained, and assault fragmentation pack, so if any infantry squad decided to charge head on towards the tank, there won't be an infantry squad in the next 5 seconds. Now, let's continue with the Fischtraktor. Year introduced, 1596, served with, Fokker Kingdoms, engine, Arbiter 17 plus clockwork, strengths, submersible, weaknesses, not watertight. Macchi's final holdouts largely consisted of strongpoints in the Caproni Islands. Many of these islands were fully fortified with flak guns, preventing landing by airship. An attack would require the Rona Pack's clumsy barges and improvised navy to somehow land and supply troops. As the mainland fell, Fokker seized a project by the Macchi Seeheer to build an amphibious tank. High Command wanted these vehicles assigned to prestigious inlander regiments for the final glorious actions. However, the tanks floundered in the testing canals, filling with water through every seam, and nothing seemed to prevent the crew compartment flooding. Finally, the design was given over to Fischervolk engineers to be adapted for their marines, who at least couldn't drown in it. The result was an otherworldly asymmetric vehicle which deliberately filled with water to drive along the seabed. There is a long-standing rumor that no inlander engineer was allowed to see the full blueprints to protect their sanity. The tank was a startling success, with examples used in the Caproni campaigns often painted in strange clashing patterns that made it even more difficult to tell which side was the front. Fischer crews especially appreciated the cooling effect of the water in the Caproni heat. Based on the Schneider CA1, the Fischtraktor is an amphibious tank, but in a very different sense of the word. The tank itself is amphibious, and you better hope your crews are too. The Fischtraktor is slow, but it can move over obstacles somewhat decently and has a bit more traction on ground than most tanks. It has armor profile of 431, enough to take a field gun head on, but with only 23 integrity. You better hope it doesn't pen, because the tank will be on fire if it does. The crew feels somewhat safe in it. Its diesel engine is quite reliable, comes with enough fuel uses and tension, we will talk about this later, and it has a somewhat decent price tag for its capability. In reality, the Schneider CA1 was not an amphibious tank, but it was France's first tank. It was usable. The only problem it really has was that its cannon is really more of a trench mortar that can only sling a 75mm high explosive shell, but that's more than enough against infantry. The only reason they didn't build more of it was because France later built the future king of armored cavalry, and they also needed a tank with an actual cannon, though that one brought its own share of problems, big ones. Now, let's get to the point of this tank. First, it can literally drive underwater, thanks to the madness from the seabed trait, but the crew must be Fischervolk, wearing diving suit, or get really good at holding their breath for possibly hours. So good fucking luck, because this thing is not watertight. It does this by having two engines, a diesel engine for on-land travel, and a clockwork engine for underwater. In fact, because of it being a hybrid, even when the diesel engine is turned off or broken, this thing will run just fine, replacing any fuel use with tension. However, it only has 3 tension, and when you check engine while running on clockwork engine, you will quickly deplete the tension, so you can't really use it for long in combat. Whatever you do when your diesel engine is out, you better do it fast. But if you still can turn on your diesel engine, you can simply use check engine move to recharge the clockwork engine, so this thing can really run further than most other tanks by having a built-in rechargeable engine, which is useful because it's not like you can rely on truck to refuel you when you are moving underwater. Finally, it also has the Eldritch Geometries trait, which causes any crew without creepy to freak the fuck out, and also cause infantry to run away in fear more from tank terror, so the Fischtraktor is slightly safer from tank breaker than most other tanks too, which is also very useful because this thing has no weapon range, as its main gun is an assault howitzer that can be aimed forward and right, and then 2 light machine gun left and right. The assault howitzer might have no range to speak of, but it will definitely destroy any buildings and infantry squad in front of it, perfect for demolishing naval defense and bunkers, and it can hit anything well armored hard from sheer concussion force, so even proper tank is not safe from it. However, much like most Fokker tanks, this thing has no defense at its rear, and with 1 armor, that place is vulnerable as hell. Plus, light machine guns are just barely enough to deter determined infantry, so better have some infantry escorts, which is easier said than done if you are driving this thing right out of water for an assault. This thing does have a single hatch to add pintle mounted gun on, but it's for the driver, so you can't drive and shoot the gun at the same time. This thing also has internal engine access, but there's no dedicated place for mechanic. The loader is the mechanic. At least you only need 5 crew to run this thing, so it doesn't cost much to run the Fischtraktor. So how do you deal with this thing? Well, if the enemy is smart and use it to ambush you from any water surface, get your infantry squad away from its frontal and right arc, or else they will be paced. If you are parking or have your squad sitting inside a building for cover as this thing is rumbling towards you, run, get out. That assault howitzer is the best short-range anti-building weapon in the game. Do not become its prime target. However, if you encounter a Fischtraktor out in the open and you have long-range anti-tank weapon, that thing is dead. Flanking it with tank or infantry squad works just fine against this thing too, just try not to do it clockwise. As for its modifications, there's snorkel, resealing, An exorcism upgrade that removes eldritch geometries and that is not dead, which can eternal drive traits, meaning this thing no longer has the clockwork engine, but crew without creepy can now drive this thing without going nuts. The tank also no longer flood, but can only ford shallow lakes and rivers now. There's also the improvised anti-tank weapon modifications, which adds a forward-mounted anti-tank rifle to the driver, perfect for any long-range sniping of lightly armored vehicles and tanks, but the driver can't shoot and drive at the same time, also costs quite a bit of thalers. And that's basically it on these two tanks, the respectable transport Mannschaftswagen with a near guarantee on safety, and the technically amphibious Fischtraktor that requires some adjustment on the cruise to work. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe and click that notification bell button. If you want to see the videos early as well as further support my channel, you can join in my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.